This isn't about making her chase you. It's about stopping the chase for yourself. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being seen. Not because you lacked value, but because you forgot how to hold it in your own presence. You kept trying to earn something that should have been drawn to your gravity. And the moment you started asking how to be wanted, you weren't chasing desire. You were trying to recover from being quietly replaced, from being misunderstood, from being the man who showed up fully, only to watch her look right through you. There's a hidden pain most men won't admit. Not to their friends, not to themselves. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the pain of becoming invisible, of feeling your silence used against you, of being kind and present and still not enough. That's where these words begin, not in confidence, but in the quiet collapse that comes when you've given everything and she still pulls away. The obsession men seek from women isn't about control, it's about recognition, to be seen again, to be mirrored, to feel like your presence finally leaves a mark. But Stoicism doesn't chase that. It reclaims what was given away too easily. Zeno of Citium didn't teach inside grand palaces. He spoke from the stoa, the porch, the threshold between public noise and private truth. He taught that wisdom begins when charm ends. This isn't about pickup tactics or pretending to be distant. This is about becoming a man whose presence doesn't rise or fall with her mood. A man who speaks less, but whose silence speaks more than other men's words. Stoicism doesn't teach you how to seduce. It teaches you how to stop erasing yourself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And that's where the true magnetism begins. Not in performance, but in embodiment. Not in making her feel something, but in feeling so anchored in your center that she can't help but notice. The feminine is drawn to polarity, but polarity requires stillness, gravity, depth, not tricks, not flattery, not desperate gestures dressed as confidence. You don't win obsession by impressing. You don't win her by trying. You become unforgettable by becoming unshakable. When the world pulls on you, and you don't flinch. When she tests your foundation, and finds stone instead of noise. When your silence feels heavier than another man's approval. She won't understand why she keeps thinking about you, but she will. Obsession doesn't begin with attraction. It begins with reverence, and reverence is earned the moment you remember who you are, without needing her to agree. This isn't about turning her head. It's about reclaiming the man who stopped lifting his own. This is for the man who doesn't want to manipulate her. He just wants to stop being erased. Welcome back to your own gravity. Let her orbit come second. Most men don't realize how loud their reactions are. They defend, explain, fidget, chase. The moment pressure rises, her silence, her tone, her mood, they lean forward instead of standing still. But a man anchored in himself doesn't flinch. He absorbs discomfort the way the ocean absorbs wind without losing its depth. Holding stillness isn't about ignoring her. It's about refusing to abandon yourself when her emotions try to pull you out of frame. Stillness is not passivity. It is command without noise. It tells her, without a word, that your center cannot be moved by her storm. Most women don't consciously test a man's emotional integrity, but they feel it. They notice when his voice rises to match theirs, when his body tenses to defend what doesn't need defense. They feel when his energy scatters, trying to appease, trying to fix, trying not to lose her. And in that moment, she loses something too: respect. Your ability to remain still when everything around you trembles is the first sign that you are not like the rest. The still man becomes a reference point, not because he's stoic by posture, but because his nervous system doesn't betray him. In neuroscience, this is called prefrontal dominance, emotional regulation, the calm that signals safety and trust, not just for her, but for yourself. A man who regulates his emotions without suppressing them becomes rare. A man who feels deeply without reacting blindly becomes unforgettable. This is where obsession begins, not in charm, but in contrast. Most men are predictable in their panic, but when you don't blink, when your breath stays slow, when your presence remains still, she starts to look closer, not because you asked her to, but because she can't help it. When you don't shift to win her, she has no choice but to wonder what anchors you so deeply. Stillness then becomes the silent language of worth, and the man who speaks it becomes the man she can't stop remembering. Most men hear a woman's frustration and think it's a call to act, to fix, to solve, to reassure. But what many don't realize is that beneath her words is not always a problem. It's often a question: can you hold this without breaking? Emotional containment is not about silence. It's about staying grounded when her emotions swirl. It's the ability to listen fully without rushing to interrupt her pain with a solution, because often she isn't asking for one. Containment is the hidden language of respect. It tells her she can unravel without you unraveling too. It shows her you aren't afraid of her feelings, that you don't take them personally, and that you don't need them to change for you to remain calm. A man who listens not just with his ears but with his presence speaks a truth that no words can offer. You are safe here, but I don't exist to save you. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." In that silence, in that listening, you build something rare: trust, and beyond trust, reverence. Because when you don't flinch at her chaos, when you don't try to clean up her emotions like a mess, you reveal something most women rarely see in men: a steady container. Emotional containment doesn't mean apathy. It means you're no longer triggered by every wave. It means your foundation is deeper than her storm. And slowly, without knowing why, she starts to trust it. She starts to trust you, not because you rescued her, but because you didn't need to. That is power. Quiet, unshaken, felt. A man like that doesn't chase her peace. He becomes it. And once she feels it, she will remember him. Even in silence, especially in silence. Mystery isn't about disappearing. It's not about being unreadable or emotionally cold. True mystery is restraint with meaning. It's the difference between hiding and choosing not to reveal everything. Most men, in their hunger to connect, overshare. They speak to fill space, thinking that exposure equals intimacy. They pour out every wound, every confession, hoping she'll see their heart. But what often happens is the opposite. She sees noise, not depth. The Stoic man understands that presence isn't proven by words. It's felt in what remains unsaid. Mystery isn't about secrecy. It's about selectivity. Selective vulnerability is the art of offering only what carries weight. Not everything that hurts deserves to be spoken. Not every scar needs to be shown. There's strength in being known, but there's power in being slowly revealed. When a man speaks only when it matters, his silence becomes charged. Every word holds weight. Every pause creates tension. And in that tension, she leans forward. Not because she's confused, but because she senses there's more beneath the surface. What you don't say should echo with intent, not manipulation, meaning. You're not withholding to appear strong. You're silent because you don't need to perform. That kind of presence makes her wonder, makes her question, makes her feel. Mystery isn't about playing games. It's about walking through the world with layers that aren't offered to everyone. It's about showing her, gently, gradually, that your inner world is not for free. And the more she senses that your soul isn't exposed on demand, the more she wants to understand it, to earn it, not because you asked her to, but because she can't help but feel drawn to it. The man who speaks with depth, who restrains without detaching, who reveals only when it means something, becomes the emotional cipher. And that's where obsession begins, not with noise, but with weight. Not with what's shared, but with what's sacred. Predictability is safe, but over time, safe becomes invisible. A man who shows up the same way every time loses gravity, not because he lacks value, but because he stopped creating contrast. The masculine edge isn't found in chaos. It's found in conscious unpredictability, in pattern disruption that doesn't betray consistency, but sharpens it. Zeno of Citium taught through paradox. What appeared solid would bend. What appeared silent held thunder. Stoic unpredictability is not erratic behavior, it's calibrated presence. It's when she expects a reaction, and you offer a pause. When she anticipates validation, and you give calm. When she expects comfort, and you offer clarity instead. Not out of cruelty, out of centered power. The mind becomes obsessed not with what is fully known, but with what remains just beyond reach. This is where intermittent validation becomes more than a concept. It becomes art. You don't disappear. You don't ghost. You become strategically rare, not cold, just unavailable enough that your presence remains sacred, not predictable, just consistent enough that your absence creates curiosity instead of insecurity. Women don't want men who break promises, but they are drawn to men who break patterns, because patterns numb the senses, and unpredictability awakens them. Emotional obsession begins when she cannot predict your next movement, not because you're playing games, but because you are too present to be programmed. The man who is quietly rare becomes a mystery her nervous system begins to crave, not for drama, but because every time he appears, something shifts, something deepens, something sharpens. You become the moment she didn't know she needed, not by performing, but by simply refusing to become a routine. A man like that doesn't have to chase attention. His absence does it for him. She doesn't respond to what you say. She responds to what you are. Your nervous system speaks louder than your compliments, louder than your efforts, louder than any well-crafted phrase. And whether you realize it or not, she mirrors it. She feels it. If your breath is erratic, she feels unstable. If your gaze is grasping, she feels cornered. If your gestures plead, she pulls back. But when your body speaks calm, when your presence doesn't chase, something shifts inside her. She slows down. She tunes in. This is called limbic resonance. It's not theory. It's biological. The feminine attunes to the masculine not through logic, but through presence. And when your presence isn't reaching, but rooted, she feels it in her chest before she names it in her mind. A man who doesn't chase, who simply stands there, complete in himself, becomes an emotional puzzle, one she doesn't want to solve, but surrender to. You don't earn her attention by following her energy. You earn it by anchoring your own. You let her move, emote, react, and you remain. Calm, observant, unattached, not distant, not dismissive, just deeply there. The paradox is that the less you chase her, the more she must find you, not out of fear, but out of fascination. Masculine presence without pursuit is a language of its own. It tells her, I'm already full. You are welcome to join, but I won't empty myself to be chosen. And that is rare. That is unforgettable. When you don't need her to complete you, she feels the quiet invitation to come closer. And when she does, it's not because you asked. It's because your silence offered what words never could. Safety, clarity, and gravity. The kind that makes her nervous system settle. The kind that lingers. The kind she remembers long after you've left the room. There's a moment when you realize your peace costs too much to keep proving your worth. That moment is when detachment begins. Not from apathy, not from coldness, but from a quiet recognition. Your soul is not for negotiation. The man who detaches doesn't stop feeling. He stops needing permission to stand still in his truth. The world teaches men to prove, to respond, to show they care by how quickly they react. But Stoic masculinity doesn't seek approval. It commands respect by walking away from what tries to control it. Emotional detachment, when rooted in clarity, isn't a weapon, it's a boundary. It's the line that says, you can bring chaos, but it won't move me. Seneca warned, no man is free who is not master of himself. And this is where many men fall. They confuse passion with permission. They confuse presence with availability. But a man who can feel everything and still choose silence is not weak. He is sovereign, because power is not in how loud you respond, it's in how calmly you decide. When a woman sees that you don't need her reaction to validate your direction, she reevaluates your value, not out of fear, but reverence. When she senses you can walk, not to punish her, not to provoke her, but simply because your center demands it, her perception of you shifts. You're no longer just a man in her orbit. You become the standard she didn't expect to meet. Detachment, when earned, creates a different kind of attraction, one rooted in stability, in poise, in the ability to say nothing and still speak volumes. You're not playing hard to get, you're being hard to shake, and that becomes the difference between being liked and being remembered, between attention and obsession. Most men shrink their boundaries to stay close. They think compromise is the cost of love. But the moment you soften your standards to be liked, you stop being respected. A man's code isn't loud, it's lived. It doesn't need explanation, negotiation, or applause. It just is. And when a woman meets a man who doesn't bend to be chosen, she feels something unfamiliar, gravity. Your standards are not rules for others. They are reminders for yourself, of who you are, of what you allow, of where your soul no longer agrees to be compromised. She will test them, not out of cruelty, but curiosity, to see if they're real, to feel if they hold. And when they do, when she leans into resistance and finds steel instead of softness, something inside her shifts. She realizes you are not shaped by approval. You are shaped by principle. Masculine polarity begins where negotiation ends. Attraction is not born in kindness. It is born in congruence, in a man whose words match his walk, in a man who doesn't beg to be understood but remains rooted in his values, even if it means being misunderstood. That kind of man doesn't just invite interest, he demands respect. And respect is the seed of obsession. You don't need to preach your standards, you just live them. silently, repeatedly. And the right woman, if she's ready, will recognize that she's not dealing with a man seeking approval. She's standing before a man who has already approved of himself. That mirror is sharp. It shows her where she bends, where she performs, where she compromises. And if she's honest, she will either rise to meet it, or she will step away. But no matter what she chooses, you do not change. That is your power. Quiet, absolute, unapologetic. And that is the man she remembers when the noise fades. The one who didn't adjust his soul for a seat at her table. The one who became the table and waited in silence for what aligned. You don't win a woman's mind by collecting tactics. You don't win her heart by performing. Obsession isn't earned by being impressive. It's triggered by something deeper. By a man who no longer needs to prove himself. A man who has stopped apologizing for his standards. A man who has remembered what masculinity feels like when it's no longer chasing approval. That kind of man doesn't ask to be seen, doesn't. He simply becomes impossible to forget. Zeno didn't teach through persuasion. He taught through presence. He stood at the edge of noise and chose the stillness of truth. You must become that kind of presence. Not loud, not desperate, just anchored. Let your silence be louder than their need for explanation. Let your essence be what speaks when words fall short. You are not here to impress. You are here to embody. Chrysippus took Zeno's teachings and deepened them. Just like you must deepen who you are, not flatter what she wants to hear. You are not a slogan. You are not a highlight reel. Your value must unfold slowly, layer by layer, revealing more power the closer she looks. And if she's not ready for that kind of depth, let her stay shallow. Your soul is not for discounts. You are not a flame. Flames dance, beg, consume. You are gravity, still, constant, unmoved, and slowly, without needing to chase, everything begins to fall toward that, including her. So forget the man who tried to be enough. He was tired, he was honest, but he was bending to be seen. Don't try to impress her. Try to forget the man who needed to. The moment you do, she will never forget you. Because obsession doesn't begin with desire. It begins with reverence. And reverence is only given to men who have finally remembered who they are, quietly, fully, without apology.